Hi, I hope you're having a great day today. Today, I'd like to share a story with you called When Will We Get There by Anne Harth. I'm looking at this picture, and it looks like these two children are maybe going on a car trip. Have you ever had to go on a long car trip? Was it boring? Or what did you do to entertain yourself until you got there? Did you maybe play on a telephone? Or maybe you listened to some music on the radio? Maybe you brought a book, or maybe you brought a whole bunch of toys to play with until you arrived at your destination. Let's see what happens in this story. Dylan climbed into the back seat. He helped his little sister with her seatbelt. The car was filled with dolls, stuffed animals, books, and crayons. "Did you bring everything in your room, Laura?" he said. Laura shook her head. "No, my bed's still there." Dylan laughed. Mom started the car and backed out of the driveway. Dylan opened his book. Chapter 1, he read. "When will we get there?" Laura tugged at Dylan's sleeve. He looked up. "Mom, how long will it take to get to Nana's?" Mom glanced at her watch. "We'll be there in 2 hours." Laura frowned. "That's forever." She picked up a doll and combed its hair. So it looks like we have three characters in this story. We have the mom, we have the sister Laura, and we have brother Dylan. Who do you think is going to have a harder time on this car trip? I'm thinking this is going to be a little bit more difficult for Laura. Dylan looked down at his book. Chapter 1, he read. Peter Potter was stuck. "How much longer now?" Laura said. Dylan looked up. "Almost 2 hours." Laura frowned. She pulled out a piece of paper. She opened a box of crayons and she started to draw. Dylan looked out the window. They were on the highway. Trucks and cars whizzed past. The trees on the side of the road were a blur. I love this page because I'm able to do some visualization. It says trucks and cars whizzed past. Even though we're not seeing that in the picture, can you visualize that in your mind, what that might look like? The trees on the side of the road were a blur. Can you picture that in your mind? Yes, Dylan's mom is probably driving so fast that as they drive past the trees, they literally look blurry. He watched a man on a red motorcycle pull up beside them. A tiny dog sat in front of the rider. Dylan waved. The motorcycle sped up and disappeared. Again, there's no picture of a red motorcycle or a tiny dog sitting on the motorcycle, but can you visualize that? Dylan looked down at his book. Chapter 1, he read. Peter Potter was stuck. His leg was trapped. "When will we get there?" Laura said. Dylan sighed. "Soon." He looked up. "You could play with your dolls," he said. Do you think Dylan is getting a little bit annoyed? I think so too. Laura shook her head. "They're watching a movie." She pointed to a piece of blank paper. It was taped to the back of the seat. The three dolls and a stuffed elephant sat in front of it. How funny. She must have been using that paper as a pretend movie screen for her animals and her dolls. You could draw a picture. Dylan tapped the box of crayons. It's too bumpy. You could read a book. Lara frowned. She opened her alphabet book. Do you think she wanted to read? I don't think so either, since she frowned when he made that suggestion. But goodness, Dylan's a good big brother to make all of these suggestions for Lara. Dylan looked down at his own book. Chapter 1, he read. Peter Potter was stuck. His leg was trapped under a giant rock. When will we get there? Lara said. Lara, I'm trying to read, Dylan said. Lara smiled. She poked Dylan's leg. Will you read to me? Dylan sighed. Will you be quiet? Lara nodded. Dylan slid closer to his sister. He buckled his seatbelt and opened his book. Chapter 1, Dylan said. Peter Potter was stuck. Lara grew quiet. What's happening here? I see these little Z's. I'm wondering if she's dozing off to sleep. This might be a good picture clue. Let's find out. Dylan read a little more. His leg was trapped under a giant rock. Lara rested her head on Dylan's arm. Dylan kept reading. He pulled and he pulled, but it wouldn't move. Lara was silent as Dylan read. He peeked down at his sister. Sure enough, she was sound asleep. Dylan kept reading. When Dylan was on the 5th chapter, the car slowed. Mom turned onto a small street. She pulled into a driveway and stopped. Dylan looked up. Nana waved and hurried toward the car. Lara lifted her head. She rubbed her eyes. When will we get there? She said. Dylan laughed. We're there. That's sweet. So how did Lara end up being entertained in the car? You're right. She ended up falling asleep for most of the car ride. Where does this story take place? Exactly. It takes place in the car the entire time, doesn't it? Until they arrive at their Nana's house at the very end. Why couldn't Laura play with her dolls? Do you remember? Sometimes it's good to go back to that part in the story and reread those couple of pages. Dylan suggested that she could play with her dolls. And what did she say? Do you remember? Laura shook her head. They're watching a movie. Remember, her dolls were watching that pretend movie, so she couldn't play with them. And by the way, what story was Dylan reading? Do you remember? I'm not sure that we ever got the actual title, but we definitely know it was a story about Peter Potter, whose leg was trapped under a giant rock. I hope you really enjoyed this story. Take care, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.